I spent 1,450 Canadian dollars on my ROG Xbox Ally X, and I might have to return it. It's not just because I'm spontaneously good with my money, but does that extra $1,000 price cap really justify the upgrade from my original ROG Ally? Well, in this video, I aim to get to the bottom of that and figure out which one of these am I keeping. First off, hey, if you're new here, I'm Coulter, and on this channel, I buy things so that you don't have to and do weird mods to them so that you don't have to risk your own tech. So if that sounds interesting to you, be sure to subscribe below to catch all the future uploads and shenanigans I get up to around here. So today I'm answering the question that you all keep asking, should I upgrade from my original ROG Ally, or even the ROG Ally X, to something like the ROG Xbox Ally X, the big shiny new kid on the block with the grips and the extra RAM and the Z2 Extreme and all that good stuff. And to get to the bottom of this, we're going to compare 6 games across both the 17 watt and 30 watt performance modes to get a proper raw performance comparison between these two and see just how much more performance do we gain on that Z2 Extreme versus that Z1 Extreme chip a lot of us already have in our go bags. So first, let's talk money. So here in Canada, you can get a used ROG Ally Original for about $400 Canadian, quite reliably. I see them come and go at that price pretty consistently. And then on top of that, the JSAW battery upgrade kit that lets you put the 65 watt hour battery in the original Ally, which I did in a recent video, check that one out if you missed it, only runs you about $115. And so my baseline comparison price for an upgraded battery original Ally is $515 Canadian used. And no, a 65 watt hour battery is not as big as an 80 watt hour battery, but it closes the gap pretty decently, at least for how long I tend to game on an Ally in one sitting. Now compare that $515 price tag to what I paid at Best Buy, MSRP plus taxes, which was about 1,450 Canadian dollars. Now that's a $935 gap between these two handhelds, and spoiler, for about 1,500 bucks, you can build yourself a pretty nice gaming PC. I even priced them out on Marketplace, and I saw multiple builds featuring like 4070s in them or something, which made me really want to make sure that the price justified the upgrade to the new Ally. Now my personal decision is even trickier because unfortunately I already have to return my Xbox Ally X, largely because the right grip vibration motor is having this weird thing where it sounds like a baseball card and bike spokes. It's like really loud and sounds kind of off. And on top of that, I've had to force the touchscreen driver to reinstall itself more than once, and I never had to do that on my original Ally, so both the hardware and the software seem a little bit oddly looser on the Xbox Ally X, at least for me, and I'm within the return window, so I feel like I should go ahead and return it and then decide whether or not I'm going to rebuy it. Hence why I'm very curious how this whole benchmarking experience turns out. Now to keep things fair, I'm gonna make sure we align the power modes of both of these Allies. And so since the new Ally's performance mode is 17 watt, I created a custom performance mode on the original Ally at 17 watt, but obviously it's not just 17 watt that you set in the settings. You have to set the SPPT and the FPPT, and for those numbers I set them to 25 because I'm pretty sure watching the stats on the new Ally, it allows itself to boost past 17 a little bit, and I didn't want to shortchange the original Ally. So that should keep it pretty fair, but let me know in the comments if I'm completely out to lunch on that estimate. And as for the turbo modes, same thing. Obviously they both have different turbo modes, and so I set them both to a custom 30 watt profile with an SPPT of 43 watt and an FPPT of 53 watt. Mostly because that's just how high the original Ally can go, so I wanted to give him as strong a chance as possible to compete. And I'm glad I did because the results got a little spicy in some titles. Starting with Cyberpunk at 1080p medium, things get interesting right out of the gate. At 17 watt, the Ally X, and yes, I'm just gonna call it the Ally X for this video, but just know that no, I'm not referring to the upgraded version of the original Ally. I'm talking about the Xbox Ally X, but it's just too long a dang name, okay? So at 17 watt, the Ally X hits 30 FPS, and the original Ally manages 25 FPS, so 20% better to the Xbox Ally here. But at 30 watt, the Ally X really destroys it with 41 FPS versus 30 FPS, which given that that's a 37% jump up to the Ally X, that's taking you from kinda playable to actually smooth. But here's where things get a little weird. So in Red Dead Redemption 2, we see similar gains, 30% better at 17 watt and 29% better at 30 watt, but both devices had concerning frame drops here, with minimums dipping way lower than I'd like. So not sure what that's about or if this is typical. I don't remember seeing that before. before, but maybe that's just how RDR2 does it. But the original Ally was definitely defeated on this one. However, over in Batman Arkham Knight, both devices crushed it. The original Ally delivered at 52 FPS at 17 watt, and the Ally X bumped it up to 62 FPS, so 19% better. And at 30 watt, we had 57 versus 68 FPS. So again, about 19% improvement. But honestly, as far as actual gameplay, both are buttery smooth here, and this is where the upgrade felt the least necessary. But then we move over to titles like Spider-Man, and that's where the Xbox Ally X really started to shine. So at 17 watts, it's a modest comparison, 37 average versus 32 FPS average, so about 16% better. But at 30 watts, the Ally X hits 57 FPS, while the original Ally limps to 40 FPS, which is a massive 43% performance boost between the original Ally and the Xbox Ally X, which is the biggest gap in our entire suite, and this is definitely a game where that extra horsepower generally transforms the experience. As for The Witcher 3, we saw steady improvements where the Ally X favored 16% better at 17 watt and 23% better at 30 watt. Both handle it well, but of course the Ally X will give you that extra smoothness in more intricate areas like combat where you might appreciate it more. And finally, in Hogwarts Legacy, a newer, more demanding title, at 17 watts, the Ally X averaged 40 FPS versus just 31 on the original, so 29% better. And at 30 watts, we got 45 FPS versus 35, so maintaining that 29% or so gap. And this is again an example where newer games really appreciate having that newer Z2 Extreme chip and showing the most generous gains in these titles. Now really quick, before we jump forward into the total average percentage gains and the other factors at play between these two handhelds, I want to quickly throw one more handheld into the mix, and that is actually the Switch 2. And the reason I throw that in there is because not everyone watching this video, sometimes myself included, really cares about the crazy intense graphical fidelity of what they can get from a handheld console. Sometimes not even a console. And given all the recent hype about how the Switch 2 can play Cyberpunk, I was like, actually, yeah, how is the Switch 2 playing Cyberpunk? And how does that performance compare to our original Ally here, who just got kicked around a little bit by its older brother, but might have a few tricks up its sleeve yet? So it turns out that the way the Switch 2 renders Cyberpunk is it renders it at 720p and upscales to 1080. And on handheld, it renders it like 450p or something and upscales to 810p or something. And when I read that, I thought, I'm thinking our original Switch is gonna beat that pretty well. And if you take a look at this graph, it sure as heck does, because when I benchmarked the original Ally running Cyberpunk at 720p using FSR upscaling to get it up to 1080p, we saw some very mighty gains of around 20 FPS at handheld / 17 watt mode. And even our native 1080p benchmark of the original Ally was roughly in the ballpark of the upscaled performance of the Switch 2. And then when I cranked the power of the original Ally to 30 watt, we beat the Switch 2 by as much as 23 FPS. So it may be 2023 hardware, but it beat that 2025 Switch for sure. And bear in mind, going back to our $515 used upgraded ROG Ally baseline, an MSRP Switch 2 in Canada without any bundled game is $630. And suddenly paying 115 Canadian arcade tokens more than this guy for a much smaller game library isn't looking like the best play. But then again, if you love Nintendo games, then what are you gonna do? Download them? Now there's one very important factor we've been intentionally ignoring up until now, but I think it's very important that we address, and that is optimization. Ever since the original Ally came out, everyone's been very aware that the secret sauce of playing AAA games of any variety on these ROG Ally, or in general any Windows handheld, has been optimization. Downscaling, FSR, frame gen, lower graphics, you name it, we're trying it because we want to get the most pleasant frame rates at the most pleasant graphical fidelity at our preferred battery churn on these devices. And as a calibration point, I went back to Spider-Man on the original Ally, where the Xbox Ally X had really trounced the original Ally. And if we take a look here, first, I dropped the resolution to 900p and just let FSR upscaling kick in. And instantly that bumped us up into the mid to high 30 FPS on average. So not bad to start. Then I bumped it down to 900p at medium settings instead of high. All of a sudden we're in the mid 40s. Then I turned on frame gen, and all of a sudden we're in like the 60 to 70 FPS range. Now, I'll be honest, I'm not a huge fan of frame gen. I think it feels a little weird and morphy, and I don't know, it's not really my thing. If it's your thing, then sick. number go higher. But I quickly turned that off and proceeded with my other settings. So with frame gen off, I then dropped it to 720p medium settings, which, let's remember, the Steam Deck is marketed as a 720p handheld, and at this 7-inch screen size, 720p upscaled to 1080 is still nothing to sneeze at. And at that 720p with FSR upscaling and medium settings, we're cruising at high 50s to 60 FPS average on this title, all at my 17-watt profile. I didn't even crank this thing to turbo. And that kind of brings us down to a core question. On a 7-inch screen, are you really gonna notice that much of a difference between 1080p high settings and 720p upscaled medium settings? Especially when you're just, enjoying the gameplay and swinging through New York. You might notice for a second when you load up the game, and then you just start enjoying the game. At least I do, but maybe you're a pixel peeper. And that's cool. In that case, the Xbox Ally X might be for you. But if you're more like me and you would rather have a longer lasting battery life, keeping it at that 17-watt profile, rather than have 45 minutes of battery, but at the best possible graphical fidelity you can achieve, then maybe the more economical used ROG Ally with the battery upgrade is more your speed. But really, I think it just comes down to knowing what kind of gamer you are. But finally, let's zoom out across all 6 games, and here we can see that the Xbox Ally X delivers 22% better performance overall at 17 watts, and at 30 watts, nearly 30% better average performance. These improvements are real, consistent, and most dramatic in newer AAA titles. But again, we do have to ask ourselves, is the 20 to 30% improvement in performance worth the roughly 280% increase in price between these two handheld situations? If you're a day one release of the latest AAA titles, the most hungry, least optimized games that just came out with a bunch of bugs, or if you want to dock your Ally on a Thunderbolt port and use that as your all-in-one device, or maybe even your video editing machine, then yeah, the Xbox ROG Ally is probably your speed. Or, doing a little self-reflection here, if you're going more my speed and a lot of your backlog you're working through is like titles from 7-8 years ago, like Jedi Fallen Order or Arkham Knight, and then when you're not playing those titles, you're just jumping into a couple Rocket League matches because you just want to play something really quick at the end of a long workday, then maybe that extra 1,000-ish Canadian dollars might not justify it for you to go for the Xbox Ally. Bear in mind, there are a few hard tangibles that the new Ally will have that you can't get on the original Ally, and that's the extra 8 gigs of RAM, the delightful ergonomic grips, which I cannot argue with that, they're delightful, the Thunderbolt 4 port like I mentioned, and the ability to install a full-size M.2 inside there without an adapter, which is quite nice. But again, it costs 1,450 Canadian dollars. That's like 2 Switch 2s and 2 Switch 2 games here in Canada. So here's where I land. I'm genuinely torn. The Ally X is a fantastic sequel to the original Ally, with a nice dollop of Xbox marketing thrown in there. But for over 900 Canadian dollars more, and that's a pretty massive pill to swallow, especially with its upgraded battery, is getting about 80% of the job done pretty well. And I'm proud of it for getting that amount of work done. And this is where I need your guys' help. You've heard all my arguments, and I'm sure you've thought of ones that I didn't think of at all. And so let me know in the comments what you would do if you're in my shoes. You've got both of these sitting here. You know my game style. Am I missing a critical factor here, or is the answer right in front of my face? And hey, if you watched this far in the video, leave a little controller emoji in the comments so I know that you liked this entire ramble session I put together. And if you like this video, check out last week's video where I installed full-on Bazite on the Xbox ROG Ally X and did a bunch of benchmark performance comparisons to figure out if Windows 11 Xbox full screen experience or SteamOS is the ideal operating system for your Xbox Ally. And it was an interesting ride.